Good afternoon, my name is Alina Frolova, and I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. Our first briefing today is dedicated to preparation of Ukraine to the heating season, and our guest today is Oleksandr Kharchenko, the director of Energy Industry Research Center. Mr. Oleksandr, the heating season starts on the 1st of October. We've heard the statements by the government that everything goes according to the plan. We are preparing, but what actually the plan is? Can you give us a little bit more detail about the extent to which we are ready to the heating season? Well, first of all, I'm no government, so I hardly can say anything on behalf of the government. I can give you just some independent estimates of what's going on in the energy system of Ukraine. There is intensive repairing going on. There is intense preparation to the heating season that we expect to be going on closer to something similar to the last heating season. The expectations are such that in October and November there will be new strikes on our power grid, including area lines and generation capacities. And this is exactly what formulates the approach to the preparation to the heating season, because the preparation is this year focused not on the accumulation of fuel, because according to my estimates the situation with accumulated fuel is quite good. I mean, everything related to coal and gas we have in sufficient amounts in the storage facilities. This is why the accumulation is going on, and the situation is under control in this part. So everything is evolving quite positively. Talking about the protection of the infrastructure and repair of the damaged and destroyed infrastructure, in my opinion, the situation looks as follows. Talking about the aerial lines, the large part of the works have already been done. Maybe 80% of what could be done is already done, but all those efforts will not result in the reestablishment of resilience of our power grid on the pre-war level, or even repair it back to the level of before the 22nd of October last year, because some of the spare parts, some of the pieces of equipment just didn't make it to Ukraine so far because time is required to manufacture them. So the first high voltage transformers are going to be received in August, and the intense flow will begin maybe in October, November, December, when the contracted amounts of new transformers will be coming to Ukraine. That's both good and bad news at the same time. The bad news because we won't have enough time to reinstall it to the full extent, to the extent required by the power grid. I'm not going to give you the exact figures because that's not going to be right, but anyway, we will not make it installing them in time, but still we will have reserves that in case of resumption of Russian attacks will help us to steadily and quickly resume the operation of the generation capacity. So these are the two aspects of this piece of news. The situation is difficult in the area of coal generation, because if the nuclear generation was not affected by the strikes and now the scheduled maintenance is underway with Energoatom, and I'm sure they will have everything prepared by the beginning of the heating season in the same way as Ukrinform does. They repair everything that can be repaired, and the works are quite intense. So in the area of coal generation, the situation is a little bit worse, both in the state sector. So the situation is complicated in terms of repairs and efficiency of operation of Centrenergo, the government-controlled company. And in the private sector, DTEC, who is the main player in the private coal generation field, they have problems since they cannot be helped by donors. As a private company, they don't get a lot of technical assistance, and their financial situation is quite complicated, just like the whole of the energy industry, which is significantly underfunded due to a number of reasons today. So in part of the coal generation, the situation is more complicated. However, even there, the repair works are underway. There is the cannibalization of the damaged capacities that are condemned. They help as a source of the spare parts, so those kinds of works are in progress. So in brief, I'm sure that the energy technicians do everything they can to properly prepare to the heating season. The work is quite intense in part of the physical protection installation of the additional physical barriers which would protect our high voltage substations and generation capacities against the strikes. Still, we have to expect for quite a difficult winter. Well, so there's a number of questions. To what extent the absence of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the fact that we don't have Kakhovka water reservoir now anymore, how it all resulted in the operation of the power grid? What can we compensate those capacities with? Well, talking about Kakhovka, it didn't have any significant influence. Yes, it's painful, it's unpleasant, but it's not something of principle. And the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, should it be under the control of Ukraine, should it be under control and in full operation as a part of the power grid, it would crucially change the situation with the generation capacities. And obviously, if Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is getting back under our control, it can be reinstalled into the system quite briefly. Well, however, there are certain doubts about that. That could be quite a positive case for Ukrainian power grid. Well, and how do the partners help us now? And are there any plans of emergency support for winter period when we expect the damage of our infrastructure? And another question in this same context, if we talk about the protection of the infrastructure, we understand we have limited resources in terms of air defense, but are the key power generating capacities protected? Well, I'll be honest, I'm not ready to answer the second part of your question, and I think no one is. But the deficit of air defense systems in the country is a real significant matter. There is a serious work underway on installation of physical protection, I mean installation of physical barriers for the power generating capacities. They will be installed on a number of facilities, but they don't guarantee 100% protection against the missile strikes. I cannot say that they will work 100% in terms of, in case of missile strikes. The situation with the drones is a little bit different. We understand better how to stop them or how to prevent them from targeting our facilities. In my opinion, what can be done is done to 100%. As to the donor support, it's focused on those Ukrainian recipients who are ready to receive that support, because Ukrinform, as the operator of the networks, receive very significant donor system. They properly report about spending the funds, what they report on what works are done. So we can say here about very serious support, both credit support, physical support, and grant support. But unfortunately, it's not the case for all of the state-owned companies in Ukraine, which again tells us about the necessity of proper structuring of corporate governance of the companies. Centrenergo now receives no support from the donors because there is no normal system of corporate governance there. They end up all the time in some scandalous stories, and the donors at least don't want, or I don't really know whether they want or not, but in fact they don't send proper funding to that company. That's a very simple example why the corporate governance is so important. So what is the situation with the export of electric power to Europe? Well, we have such an option in the same way that we have an import option, but now we don't have any exports to Europe, and I think that by the end of October we will be able to import at least 1.5 gigawatts of energy from Europe. It can help, but the situations may happen when this will not be enough. Well, before we proceed to the questions from our journalists, I would like to ask you for some advice for Ukrainians in terms of preparation for the heating season, both for individual consumers and the companies. Well, there is a number of aspects. First, the personal aspects. I'm not going to stop there. Everybody knows about power banks, generators for private houses. I think that it's such a broad topic which was so extensively covered that all of the Ukrainians know how to be prepared to the blackouts. But talking about a different aspect, many local governments, many mayors' offices work on covering the basic elements of critical infrastructure. So first of all is the boiler rooms for pump stations for the winter periods. Boiler rooms, they should be equipped with some reserve capacities, so even in case of some regional blackout, the heating should continue operating along with the water supply. But the specifics of the apartment blocks of Ukraine is that they are equipped with separate boiler rooms and pump stations. So to have it work in the apartment block, it's necessary to have the generators installed on the pump stations of every individual apartment block, because otherwise the heating will be supplied there, but it will not be distributed all across the building. So it will preserve the municipal infrastructure, but it will not provide the residents of those apartment blocks with water and heating. And in my opinion, people now, I mean the local governments and the residents, should start thinking about the equipment of their pump stations with the generators, because in my opinion it's significantly, it's better to have them installed there and never be needed, because my opinion today is that the probability of them being needed in the most vulnerable regions, which are in fact today Kyiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, to a certain extent Lviv, to a significant extent Zaporizhia, Zhytomyr, and a number of other cities which are in the area of high risk due to the way the power grid is built around them and how their municipal power grid is built. So those cities are in the area of high risk. So in those cities, the autonomous power supply for critical infrastructure is crucial, but the residents of the apartment blocks should think about ensuring the uninterrupted supply of all basic necessities like water and heat supply to their apartment blocks. Now the generators are not expensive in Ukraine, let's be honest, comparing to the peak prices, and now it's a good time to think about this. Thank you very much. Let's proceed to the questions from the floor. Please introduce yourself. Vladislav Obuch, Ukrinform. What's your opinion, what are the conditions under which our power technicians can continue the repairs, the pace of repairs of the infrastructure? And are they able to accumulate necessary amount of equipment, or everything that is supplied is being reinstalled right away? And do we have our manufacturing of some types of energy equipment inside Ukraine, at least to the extent that was manufactured during or before the war, I'm sorry, or do we have any new items being manufactured now? And what's going on with the gas turbines that were discussed so much during the last year? So let's divide it in two parts. To what extent are Ukrainian manufacturers loaded with the task to manufacture high voltage equipment? So yes, it's no secret for anybody, Zaporizhzhia transformer factory is in the area of direct influence by the rocket strikes. They use S-300 rockets to target it, and for what I know, the factory operates to the maximum extent possible. They do what they can physically do. Talking about the supply of the equipment, it's like being reinstalled right away, but it doesn't mean that as soon as it's reinstalled, there is no more works. The repair teams have a lot of work to do on top of that, and yes, there is a need for additional equipment, and there is a huge workload on them, so the work is underway all the time. So talking about some additional manufacturing capacities, to the best of my knowledge, there are no such things, because the manufacturing of transformers, it's a very complicated story, so I don't expect anything to appear in Ukraine during the war. I apologize. Talking about the gas turbines, for what I know, at least 4 such gas turbines are now on the way to Ukraine. They've been either procured and are on the way, or are already in Ukraine and are being installed. It requires time and effort to reinstall it, but in my personal opinion, not enough was done to do it.
Watanabe, NHK.
Good afternoon.
The effect of foreign support last winter. Last year in October and November, I was in Kyiv, and at the time we had sometimes lack of electricity because of the Russian attack. So, but after that, many countries try to send generators to Ukraine. So how these generators helped Ukraine at that moment? And your Kharchenko.
Okay,
please.
I understood your question. I will try to answer. I have several messages in answer. First of all, let me say thank you through your face to Japan government and Japan people. And Japan is, in my mind, it's one of the most effective support, provides the most effective support for Ukrainian government, especially in energy and critical infrastructure. And thank you to Japan government, a lot of critical infrastructure was renovated or in progress right now, because it was very quick and effective support to Ukraine. That thank you, and I want to say a personal thank you for this. What about generators in general? When we are talking about small, I could say humanitarian generators, which is like 30 kilowatts, 100 kilowatts or something, it's not industrial scale. Ukraine now looks like a most capable country in the world from this side. We have more than 1 gigawatt of this kind of generators around the country. And of course it helps. It helps a lot for people to be safe in most critical and most dangerous situation. But at the same time, it's not a sustainable and long-term solution. All these generators has a very bad influence to ecology because they are diesel or oil used as a source of energy. Of course, all this generator is not ready to work for a long time. They could help in emergency, but they can't replace the big industrial scale generation capacity. That I believe that now focus of Ukrainian energy industry is to renovate the big scale generation capacity. And one more time, one of key source of this renovation, some quick fix for big scale generation, it's a gas-fired turbines, power generation and gas pistons engines power generation capacity. And this is the key focus for Ukrainian energy industry now, to buy and to install this kind of capacity, and we work hard to do this as soon as possible.
Ще питання є в залі?
Do we have any more questions from the floor?
Thank you for the answer. I would like to ask again that how Ukrainian government or economical sector now try to prepare for this winter season. You said that diesel generator is also important, but for industrial basis, Ukraine need more powerful generators. So how do you still prepare for these winters for maintain industrial level?
I could say that we are acting in several directions. One direction is, of course, to restore as much as possible damaged generation, both in coal-fired and big hydro. And this work is very focused, and in support with our international partners, we are doing our best to do this. As well, to restore high voltage power grid, because for industrial user, it's a principally important to be well connected to high voltage power grid. And when we are talking about big industries, they need a high voltage. And in my mind, high voltage is best is the leader of renovation right now. They have the best results, and they are doing very good work to restore supply capacity for all key industrial players, including big steel producers, including big chemical producers, including big plants based in big cities in Ukraine. That this work is in progress, but this is like emergency work. In parallel, government, what I know about government activity, that government talking to partners how we can develop and implement a program of renovation of generation capacity in general. And this program will be focused on gas-fired generation, biomass-fired generation, and biogas, as I know. And now it is in like very active discussion with all key partners. As I know, one more time, I'm not a government representative.
Якщо можна ще одне запитання, от уточнення по газу. Ви по своєму вступному слову.
And a little bit more about the gas capacities. You said that the gas storages are now replenished, but some experts say that to some extent the plans for accumulation of gas were a little bit lowered, and given the cold winter, the needs of Ukraine were not properly calculated in these preliminary estimates. Well, look, I have certain access to those calculations, so we have independent calculations as well as to the amount of gas to be needed, and they are different depending on the scenario to be evolved. It depends on a number of factors objectively. In my opinion, if Ukraine has 14 billion cubic meters in the underwater storages, and if we have 1 to 1.5 billion cubic meters contracted for winter, we can feel calm. I don't imagine a realistic scenario where we consume more than that, but I can easily imagine a realistic scenario in which we consume less because we don't have such a capacities that consume more, and it's a bigger problem in my opinion than lack of gas. Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions on the floor? Mr. Oleksandr, if we don't have any more questions, so let's wrap up. I'm reminding you that preparation has already started, so please fulfill the advice of the experts, and we hope that this winter we will suffer less damages and destruction. I'm reminding you, you were with Media Center Ukrinform. Stay tuned. Thank you.